faster. Sniffling past her. Bringing vengeance.
What if the greatest journey ever told was actually a battle against gods, monsters, fate, and your own mind? In the Odyssey, one legendary hero must cross a world filled with impossible dangers just to make it home. But this isn't just another epic adventure, it's a story of survival, sacrifice, and the price of war. In this ReelSignal Studio review, we'll break down the movie, its biggest moments, fascinating facts, and what makes the Odyssey one of the most anticipated films of 2026. Stay with USA because this journey is only beginning. The Odyssey is a 2026 epic action fantasy film written and directed by Christopher Nolan. Nolan also produced the movie together with his wife, Emma Thomas. The film is based on Homer's ancient Greek epic poem, The Odyssey. It features a large and famous cast, including Matt Damon, Tom Holland, Anne Hathaway, Robert Pattinson, Lupita Nyong'o, Zendaya, and Charlize Theron. The story follows Odysseus, played by Matt Damon, who is the Greek king of Ithaca. After the Trojan War ends, Odysseus begins a long and dangerous journey to return home. During his journey, he faces many challenges and comes across strange and powerful creatures from Greek mythology. His main goal is to survive the journey and finally return to his wife, Penelope, played by Anne Hathaway. Christopher Nolan started writing the screenplay for the movie in March 2024. By October of the same year, he had secured the project with Universal Pictures. The Odyssey was officially announced in December 2024. The casting process continued from late 2024 into early 2025. And Matt Damon was officially confirmed to play the main role of Odysseus in February 2025. Before making the movie, Nolan studied several different translations of the Odyssey. He wanted to create a version of the Greek myth that felt realistic and believable while still keeping the epic and mysterious feeling of the original story. Instead of making the world look completely like a fantasy, Nolan aimed for a more realistic style of Greek mythology. Nolan also took inspiration from several famous historical and epic films. Some of his influences included Andrei Rublev, released in 1966, and Dran, released in 1985. He was also inspired by the work of special effects artist Ray Harryhausen, who was famous for bringing mythological creatures and monsters to life through practical effects. Filming for the Odyssey took place between February and August 2025. The production traveled to many different locations around the world to create the movie's large and realistic world. Filming took place in Morocco, Greece, Italy, Scotland, Iceland, Western Sahara, and Malta. Some scenes were also filmed at the Universal Studios lot in Los Angeles. The movie was made with a huge estimated budget of around $250 million, making it one of the most expensive movies of Christopher Nolan's career. It also became a major technical achievement because it was the first feature film to be shot entirely using IMAX 70mm film cameras. This allowed Nolan to capture the large landscapes, battles, ships, creatures, and action scenes in a very detailed and powerful format. The Odyssey had its premiere at the Odeon Lux Leicester Square Inches London on July 6, 2026. It was released in theaters in the United States and the United Kingdom on July 17, 2026, by Universal Pictures. The movie was also shown in IMAX and several other premium large-screen formats, giving audiences the chance to experience the film on very large screens with high-quality picture and sound. After its release, The Odyssey received strong praise from critics. Many people especially praised Christopher Nolan's direction, the large scale of the movie, the performances of the cast, and the visual style. However, some viewers and critics also criticized the movie because it makes certain changes to the original story from Homer's ancient poem. The movie became a major box office success. It turned around $1.172 billion worldwide, making it the second highest-grossing film of 2026. It also became the second highest-grossing R-rated movie ever and reached the list of the 38 highest-grossing films of all time. The success of the movie also made The Odyssey the highest-grossing film of Christopher Nolan's career. It set several records connected to Nolan and its premium format release. Some IMAX and other premium format tickets were even sold almost a year before the movie was released, showing how much interest audiences had in Nolan's next major film. At its heart, The Odyssey is a story about a man trying to find his way home after years of war and hardship. Odysseus is not simply fighting enemies, he is also fighting against the dangers of the sea, powerful mythical creatures, and difficult situations that test his courage and intelligence. His journey becomes a test of how far a person can go when everything seems to be working against them. The movie focuses strongly on Odysseus and his desire to return to Ithaca and reunite with Penelope. His journey is filled with danger, mystery, action, and moments that connect the story to the world of Greek mythology. The combination of Nolan's filmmaking style, a huge cast, practical locations, large-scale action, and ancient mythology makes the movie one of the most ambitious films of 2026. Christopher Nolan's version of The Odyssey takes an ancient story that has been told for thousands of years and brings it to modern audiences on a massive cinematic scale. By using real locations, IMAX film cameras, practical filmmaking techniques, and a large international cast, the movie attempts to make Homer's legendary journey feel real and powerful for today's viewers. The film also stands out because of its combination of mythology and realistic filmmaking. Instead of relying only on computer-generated fantasy, Nolan wanted the world to feel physical and believable. This approach gives the story a more serious and grounded feeling while still allowing the movie to include the strange creatures, legendary events, battles, and supernatural elements that make The Odyssey such an important part of Greek mythology. With Matt Damon leading the cast as Odysseus, the movie follows a character who must survive an extremely difficult journey while trying to reach the people and place he loves. His journey is not only about traveling across the sea, it is also about patience, courage, loss, loyalty, and a strong desire to return home. Overall, The Odyssey is a massive cinematic adaptation of one of the most famous stories from ancient literature. Christopher Nolan brings together mythology, action, adventure, drama, large-scale filmmaking, and a star-studded cast to tell the story of Odysseus and his dangerous journey home. The film became one of the biggest releases of 2026, receiving strong critical attention and earning more than $1 billion worldwide. For fans of Christopher Nolan, Greek mythology, epic adventures, and large-scale action movies, The Odyssey offers a modern version of an ancient story while keeping the central idea of Odysseus's long and difficult journey home. It combines a classic story with modern filmmaking technology and Nolan's unique approach to creating serious, realistic, and visually powerful movies. The Odyssey is a 2026 epic action and fantasy movie written and directed by Christopher Nolan. Nolan also produced the movie with his wife, Emma Thomas. The film is based on Homer's famous ancient Greek story, The Odyssey. The movie has a huge and well-known cast, including Matt Damon, Tom Holland, Anne Hathaway, Robert Pattinson, Lupita Nyong'o, Zendaya, and Charlize Theron. The story follows Odysseus, played by Matt Damon. He is the king of Ithaca, a Greek island. After the Trojan War comes to an end, Odysseus begins a very long and dangerous journey to return to his home. During his journey, he faces many serious dangers and comes across strange and powerful creatures from Greek mythology. His biggest goal is to survive everything that stands in his way and finally return home to his wife, Penelope, played by Anne Hathaway. Odysseus expects his journey home to be simple, but things quickly become much harder than he imagined. The sea becomes dangerous, and he faces one challenge after another. Along the way, he meets mythical creatures and enters situations that test his strength, courage, and intelligence. Every new part of his journey brings another problem that he must find a way to overcome. At the same time, the people waiting for him at home do not know when, or even if, he will return. Penelope continues to wait for her husband while Odysseus is far away. This gives the story another emotional side because Odysseus is not only fighting to stay alive, He is also fighting to get back to his family and the life he left behind. Christopher Nolan started working on the screenplay for the Odyssey in March 2024. He spent time developing the story and planning how to bring the ancient Greek world to the big screen. By October 2024, Nolan had secured the project with Universal Pictures. The movie was officially announced in December 2024, creating a lot of excitement among movie fans. The casting process started in late 2024 and continued into early 2025. Many major actors were brought into the project, making the movie one of the most impressive casts in recent years. Matt Damon was officially confirmed to play Odysseus in February 2025. His character became the center of the entire story because the movie follows his dangerous journey back home. Before making the movie, Christopher Nolan studied different translations of Homer's The Odyssey. The original story has existed for thousands of years and has been translated and retold many times. Nolan wanted to understand the story from different versions before deciding how he wanted to present it on screen. Nolan wanted his version of Greek mythology to feel more realistic. Instead of making the entire movie look like a normal fantasy world, he wanted the locations, characters, battles, and mythical events to feel believable and physical. His goal was to make audiences feel like they were actually traveling through the ancient world with Odysseus. The director also took inspiration from several famous epic and historical movies. One of them was Andrei Rublev, a 1966 film known for its serious and realistic style. Another important influence was Ran, the 1985 epic movie directed by Akira Kurosawa. Nolan was also inspired by the work of Ray Harryhausen, a famous special effects artist who became well known for creating monsters and mythical creatures using practical effects. Filming for the Odyssey started in February 2025 and continued until August 2025. The production team traveled to many different parts of the world to film the movie. They wanted real locations that could make the ancient world look large, natural, and believable. The movie was filmed in several countries and locations, including Morocco, Greece, Italy, Scotland, Iceland, Western Sahara, and Malta. Some parts of the movie were also filmed at the Universal Studios lot in Los Angeles. Using so many different locations helped the filmmakers create the many different places that Odysseus visits during his long journey. The production of the Odyssey was extremely large and expensive. The movie had an estimated budget of around $250 million, making it one of the most expensive movies of Christopher Nolan's career. A huge amount of money was spent on locations, sets, costumes, equipment, actors, action scenes, and the technical side of the production. One of the biggest technical features of the movie is its use of IMAX cameras. The Odyssey became the first feature film to be shot completely with IMAX 70mm film cameras. This was a major achievement because IMAX film cameras are known for capturing very large and detailed images. Nolan is also well known for using large format film in his movies. He believes that shooting on film can give audiences a stronger experience, especially when the movie is watched on a giant screen. For the Odyssey, this was especially important because the movie contains huge landscapes, battles, ships, oceans, and large action scenes. The movie had its world premiere at the Odeon Lux Leicester Square Inches London on July 6, 2026. After the premiere, the film was released in theaters in the United States and the United Kingdom on July 17, 2026. Universal Pictures handled the theatrical release. The movie was available in IMAX as well as several other premium large-screen formats. This gave audiences the opportunity to watch the film on very large screens with powerful sound and high-quality picture. Because the story is so large in scale, the premium formats were an important part of the movie's release. After its release, The Odyssey received a lot of attention from critics and movie fans. Many critics praised Christopher Nolan for the way he directed the film. They also praised the large scale of the production, the visuals, the performances, and the way the ancient story was brought to modern audiences. However, the movie also received some criticism. One of the main complaints was that Nolan made some changes to Homer's original story. Because The Odyssey is one of the most famous stories in ancient literature, Some viewers expected the movie to follow the original poem more closely. Even with this criticism, the movie became a huge success at the box office. The Odyssey earned around $1.172 billion worldwide. This made it the second highest-grossing movie of 2026. It also became the second highest-grossing R-rated movie ever and reached the list of the 38 highest-grossing movies of all time. The movie also became the highest-grossing film of Christopher Nolan's career. This was a major achievement for the director, especially because Nolan already had several very successful movies before making the Odyssey. The film also broke several records connected to Nolan in premium movie formats. Some IMAX and other premium format tickets were sold almost a year before the movie was released. This showed just how much interest people had in Nolan's new project even before they could watch the movie. At the center of the movie is the journey of Odysseus. He is not simply a king who wants to return home. He is a man who has been through war and now has to survive years of danger before he can see his family again. His journey becomes a test of his courage, patience, intelligence, and determination. The biggest problem for Odysseus is that the journey home is filled with unexpected dangers. The ocean is dangerous, and the world around him is full of strange creatures and powerful forces. He has to make difficult choices while trying to keep himself and his men alive. Odysseus also has to deal with the emotional pain of being away from his family for such a long time. He does not know exactly when he will see Penelope again. Every day that passes makes the journey harder, but the thought of returning home gives him a reason to continue. Penelope is also an important part of the story. While Odysseus is facing danger far from home, she is waiting for him. Her character represents loyalty, patience, and hope. She does not know what has happened to her husband, but she continues to hope that he will eventually return. This makes the Odyssey more than just an action movie. The film is also about family, love, loyalty, survival, and the desire to return home. The action and mythology make the story exciting, but the emotional side gives the journey a deeper meaning. The movie also shows the power of ancient Greek mythology. Odysseus's journey includes legendary places, strange creatures, dangerous situations, and events that seem impossible. Nolan tries to present these elements in a way that feels serious and realistic rather than simply making them look like normal fantasy scenes. The combination of mythology and realistic filmmaking is one of the most interesting parts of the movie. Nolan uses real locations, large sets, practical filmmaking techniques, and IMAX cameras to make the world feel physical and believable. The cast is another major reason why the movie attracted so much attention. Matt Damon leads the film as Odysseus, while Anne Hathaway plays Penelope. Tom Holland, Robert Pattinson, Lupita Nyong'o, Zendaya, and Charlize Theron are also part of the large cast. Having so many famous actors in one movie made The Odyssey one of the most talked about films of 2026. Each actor brought a different character and personality to the story, helping Nolan create a large world filled with different people and challenges. Christopher Nolan also wanted the movie to feel like a huge cinematic event. The story itself is massive, so he used large locations, practical sets, real landscapes, big action sequences, and IMAX cameras to create a movie that audiences could experience on a very large scale. The movie's long production period also shows how much work went into creating it. Filming across different countries meant that the production team had to work in many different environments, from deserts and mountains to oceans and ancient-looking locations. The filmmakers had to create a world that could match the scale of Homer's story. The use of real locations also helped the movie look different from a typical computer-generated fantasy film. Instead of making every location inside a studio or creating everything digitally, Nolan and his team used real places whenever possible. This approach fits Nolan's filmmaking style. He often prefers practical filmmaking and real locations when they can help make a scene feel more believable. For the Odyssey, this style was especially useful because the story depends heavily on the feeling of a real journey through a dangerous and ancient world. The movie also focuses on the idea of home. Odysseus has spent years away from Ithaca, and his journey becomes a fight to return to the place where he belongs. Even when the journey becomes almost impossible, he continues moving forward because he wants to see his wife and return to his kingdom. This simple idea gives the entire story its emotional power. Odysseus is fighting monsters, facing the sea, and surviving dangerous situations, but behind everything is one basic goal. He wants to go home. The story also shows that reaching home is not always easy. Odysseus has to lose people, face fear, make difficult decisions, and continue even when he feels exhausted. His journey shows how determination can keep someone moving forward even when the chances of success seem very small. Overall, the Odyssey is a huge cinematic version of one of the most famous stories ever written. Christopher Nolan takes Homer's ancient story and brings it to modern audiences with a massive budget, famous actors, real locations, practical filmmaking, and IMAX technology. The movie combines action, adventure, mythology, drama, and emotion. It follows Odysseus as he travels through a dangerous world while trying to return to the people he loves. Along the way, he faces creatures, enemies, storms, and challenges that test everything he has. The film became one of the biggest movies of 2026 and achieved major success around the world. It received strong reviews, earned more than $1 billion, and became the highest-grossing movie of Christopher Nolan's career. For fans of Christopher Nolan, Greek mythology, action movies, and epic adventures, the Odyssey offers a modern way to experience an ancient story. It takes a story that has survived for thousands of years and presents it on a massive cinematic scale. In the end, the Odyssey is not only about monsters, battles, mythology, or a dangerous sea journey. It is about a man who refuses to give up on his way home. Odysseus continues his journey because he believes that somewhere beyond all the danger is his family, his kingdom, and the home he has been trying to reach for so long. That is what makes the story so powerful. Even after facing years of war and countless dangers, Odysseus keeps going. His journey becomes a story of courage, survival, loyalty, love, and hope. Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey takes this ancient journey and turns it into a large modern movie experience. With Matt Damon leading the cast, a huge international production, real-world locations, IMAX cameras, and a story filled with mythology and adventure, the film became one of the most ambitious and successful movies of 2026. Matt Damon as Odysseus. Matt Damon anchors Christopher Nolan's adaptation as Odysseus, the king of Ithaca whose cunning strategy helped end the Trojan War and whose subsequent decade-long struggle to return home forms the narrative spine. Damon, already a two-time Nolan collaborator from Interstellar and Oppenheimer, approaches the role with a grounded physicality and psychological weight that distinguishes this Odysseus from more purely heroic screen versions. The character is presented less as an untouchable mythic figure and more as a war-scarred leader haunted by the violence of Troy, carrying the emotional and moral cost of the conflict while navigating monsters, gods, and human treachery. Damon's established range spanning the intellectual intensity of Good Will Hunting, the relentless drive of the Bourne films, and the quiet competence of the Martiana positions him to convey both the strategic brilliance that invents the Trojan horse and the exhaustion of a man who has been away from his family for 20 years. Production notes and early reactions highlight how Damon leaned into the physical demands of the role, including sequences shot in real locations that required endurance and a lived-in authenticity rather than polished superhero gloss. His presence also provides a tonal center around which the large ensemble orbits. The quieter domestic scenes in Ithaca gain gravity from the audience's knowledge of what Damon has endured at sea, while the fantastical encounters gain emotional stakes because the man at their center feels recognizably human. Anne Hathaway as Penelope. Anne Hathaway reunites with Nolan for a third time, following The Dark Knight Rises and Interstellar, as Penelope, the queen of Ithaca who must defend her household and her own autonomy against a swelling crowd of suitors. Penelope is not written as a passive figure waiting for rescue. Hathaway's performance emphasizes intelligence, strategic delay, and quiet authority. She weaves the famous shroud by day and unravels it by night, buying time while managing the political and social pressures of a kingdom that believes its king is dead. Hathaway's ability to convey steel beneath elegancy is seen in roles ranging from Les Mis @ copyright labels to her more recent dramatic work serves the character's dual nature as both devoted wife and political actor. The casting also creates a visual and emotional continuity with Damon's Odysseus. The two actors share a history of working with Nolan's precise, intellectually dense style, which allows their shared scenes of recognition and reunion to carry accumulated weight. Penelope's arc runs parallel to Odysseus's voyage, and Hathaway's measured intensity ensures that the Ithaca storyline never feels secondary. Tom Holland as Telemachus. Tom Holland portrays Telemachus, the son who has grown to young adulthood without ever knowing his father. The character's journey from uncertain youth to decisive agent who must protect his mother and eventually confront the suitors gives Holland material that moves beyond the physical agility associated with his Spider-Man performances. Holland's natural earnestness and capacity for vulnerability suit a young man raised on stories of a missing father while living under the daily threat of the suitor's occupation. The role requires him to navigate both the domestic politics of Ithaca and the larger mythic world when he seeks news of Odysseus. Early commentary noted that Holland's casting brought a contemporary accessibility to a figure who in the poem is often more reactive than proactive. The film expands his agency, allowing Holland to chart a clear coming-of-age trajectory that intersects with Damon's return. The father-son dynamic benefits from the contrast between Damon's weathered experience and Holland's still-forming resolve. Robert Pattinson as Antony. Robert Pattinson, who previously worked with Nolan on Tenet, takes on Antony, the most arrogant and dangerous of the suitors. Antony is not merely an obstacle, he is the embodiment of the disorder that has overtaken Ithaca in Odysseus's absence. He is charismatic, entitled, and increasingly violent. Pattinson's capacity for unsettling charm and controlled menace, demonstrated across The Batman, Good Time, and The Lighthouse, makes him a natural fit for a character whose presence darkens every scene in the palace. The performance draws comparisons in early reviews to Joaquin Phoenix's Commodus in Gladiator, a villain whose self-regard and casual cruelty make his eventual downfall satisfying. Pattinson's Antony functions as a foil to both Damon and Holland. He threatens the household Telemachus is trying to protect and represents the kind of opportunistic power that Odysseus's long absence has enabled. The casting also continues Nolan's pattern of giving complex antagonistic energy to actors who can balance charisma with moral vacancy. Zendaya as Athena. Zendaya appears as Athena, the goddess who repeatedly intervenes on Odysseus's behalf. In a film that otherwise limits the on-screen presence of the Olympian pantheon, Athena becomes the primary divine presence, guiding, testing, and occasionally disguising herself to influence events. Zendaya's casting brings a contemporary sharpness and quiet authority to a figure traditionally depicted with classical formality. Her ability to convey intelligence and restrain power evident in Dune and Euphoria allows Athena to feel both otherworldly and strategically engaged. The role requires shifts in register as Athena appears in different forms and offers counsel that is never entirely free of calculation. By concentrating divine agency largely in one performer, Nolan and the casting team create a clearer through-line of supernatural support for Odysseus while avoiding the dilution that the large roster of gods might produce. Charlize Theron as Calypso. Charlize Theron plays Calypso, the nymph who holds Odysseus on her island for 7 years. The character is both captor and complex figure of isolation and desire. Theron's history of playing formidable, layered women, Mad Max, Fury Road, Monster, Atomic Blonde, equips her to portray Calypso as more than a seductive obstacle. The sequences on Odyssey emphasize the tension between comfort and captivity, and Theron's physical presence and emotional precision give weight to Odysseus's eventual decision to leave. Early materials positioned her as a key figure in the film's opening movement, establishing the emotional cost of Odysseus's delayed homecoming before the more episodic adventures begin. Theron's casting also reinforces the film's interest in female characters who possess genuine agency rather than existing solely in relation to the male hero. Samantha Morton as Circe. Samantha Morton delivers one of the most discussed supporting turns as Circe, the sorceress of Ea who transforms Odysseus's men into swine. Morton's Circe is neither simple temptress nor cartoonish, which the performance leans into pathos, isolation, and the history of male threat that informs her use of magic. The transformation sequence itself is achieved largely through practical means and Morton's physical work molding flesh with her hands rather than relying on a wand producing a visceral, unsettling effect that reviewers have compared to body horror. Morton has spoken of the role as a significant opportunity after years of primarily independent and television work. describing the experience of being chosen by Nolan as emotionally overwhelming. The limited screen time, approximately 10 minutes, has not prevented the performance from generating awards conversation. The intensity and specificity of Morton's source make the episode feel self-contained yet thematically resonant with the film's larger concerns about power, hospitality, and the consequences of violence. Lupita Nyong'o as Helen and Clytemnestra. Lupita Nyong'o takes on the dual roles of Helen of Troy and her sister Clytemnestra. Helen functions as the catalyst for the Trojan War, while Clytemnestra's story of betrayal and murder provides a darker counterpoint that echoes themes of homecoming and vengeance. Nyong'o's range spanning the quiet intensity of 12 Years a Slave, the physical commitment of Us, and the regal presence of her work in the Black Panther films allows her to differentiate the two figures while suggesting their shared lineage and the different ways women navigate the aftermath of war. The dual casting creates an efficient and thematically rich way to reference the larger mythic cycle without expanding the runtime with separate storylines. John Leguizamo as Eumaeus. John Leguizamo plays Eumaeus, the loyal swineherd who remains faithful to Odysseus and ultimately aids in the reclaiming of the household. Eumaeus represents steadfastness and the quiet continuity of ordinary life amid royal and divine upheaval. Leguizamo brings warmth, humor, and grounded humanity to a character who could easily become purely functional. His performance helps root the ethical sequences in recognizable human loyalty rather than pure mythic abstraction, providing an emotional bridge between the returning king and the household that has waited for him. Himesh Patel as Ulysses. Himesh Patel appears as Ulysses, Odysseus's brother-in-law and a figure whose competence and judgment are frequently found wanting. Ulysses' mistakes, particularly those that endanger the crew, while serve as foils to Odysseus's strategic mind. Patel, who previously worked with Nolan on Thanet, brings a contemporary naturalism that makes Ulysses' failures feel human rather than purely symbolic. The role allows the film to explore the tensions within Odysseus' own company and the cost of leadership when subordinates act against better judgment. Benny Safdie as Agamemnon. Benny Safdie, another Nolan alumnus from Oppenheimer, portrays Agamemnon, the leader of the Greek forces at Troy. Agamemnon's presence in flashbacks and references underscores the political and moral complexity of the war that preceded Odysseus's voyage. Safdie's ability to convey intelligence mixed with moral ambiguity suits a character whose decisions carry heavy consequences for the entire expedition. John Bernthal as Menelaus. John Bernthal plays Menelaus, husband of Helen and one of the key Greek kings. Bernthal's physical intensity and capacity for both menace and vulnerability give Menelaus a presence that extends beyond exposition. The character's own troubled homecoming and the recovery of Helen provide additional layers to the film's meditation on the costs of the Trojan War. Mia Goth as Melantho. Mia Goth appears as Melantho, one of the disloyal maidservants in Odysseus' household. Melantho's betrayal and eventual punishment form part of the harsh reckoning that accompanies Odysseus' return. Goth's talent for unsettling intensity and moral ambiguity makes the character more than a simple traitor. She embodies the corruption that has spread through the palace during the king's absence. Elliot Page as Sinon. Elliot Page plays Sinon, the Greek who persuades the Trojans to bring the wooden horse inside the city walls. Although Sinon is more fully developed in later Roman treatments than in Homer, the character provides a crucial link to the fall of Troy and to Odysseus' reputation for stratagem. Page's casting continues a pattern of Nolan collaborators taking supporting roles that carry significant narrative weight. Bill Irwin as Polyphemus, the Cyclops. Bill Irwin, who previously performed and voiced the robot Tarzan in Interstellar, brings his expertise in physical performance, mime, and clowning to the role of the Cyclops Polyphemus. The sequence relies heavily on practical effects, animatronics, puppetry, a large-scale mechanical contraption, and Irwin's on-set presence providing voice and physical cues rather than pure digital creation. Nolan has described the goal as imagining the encounter as a real, horrifying situation rather than a storybook illustration. Irwin's performance emphasizes the creature's individuality and pathos alongside its threat, aligning with Nolan's stated interest in treating monsters as characters rather than pure obstacles. The cave sequence, shot in a real location with additional practical elements including livestock, benefits from Irwin's ability to give the actors something tangible to respond to. Supporting ensemble and smaller roles. The film's large supporting cast fills out both the Voyage and the Ithaca storyline with specificity. Corey Hawkins appears as Polybus, Logan Marshall Green as the disloyal Gotthard Melanthius, Josh Stewart as Antifates, Reinhurst as Mentor, Kate Fugoli as the nursery, Clea Jovanadapo as Elpiner, Andrew Howard as Polites, Jesse Garcia, William Lee, Jimmy Gonzalez, Anthony Molinari, and others populate the ranks of Odysseus's men and the suitors. Travis Scott appears as a bard, contributing both performance and musical elements. Younger versions of certain characters, including teenage Antinous and Sinon, are cast to allow for flashbacks and continuity across the long timeline. The breadth of the ensemble reflects Nolan's approach of treating even brief appearances with care, ensuring that the world feels populated by distinct individuals rather than interchangeable background figures. Casting patterns and collaborative continuity. A notable feature of the ensemble is the number of actors with prior Nolan credits: Damon, Hathaway, Pattinson, Safdie, Patel, Irwin, Page, and others create a core of performers already fluent in the director's methods. His preference for practical effects, precise camera movement, and intellectually dense material. This continuity allows for efficient communication on a production of enormous logistical scale while also giving the film a sense of internal coherence. Newer collaborators such as Zendaya, Theron, Nyong'o, Holland, Morton, and Leguizamo expand the range of energies and bring different generational and stylistic strengths. The overall casting strategy balances star power capable of carrying a major studio release with character actors who can make smaller roles memorable, and it privileges performers capable of both large-scale physical storytelling and intimate psychological work. The Odyssey, 2026, a complete movie review, audience reaction and box office. Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey is one of the biggest and most talked about movies of 2026. The film takes Homer's ancient Greek story and turns it into a huge modern cinematic experience. With Matt Damon playing Odysseus and Christopher Nolan directing, the movie arrived with extremely high expectations. Before its release, many people were already calling it one of the most ambitious movies of Nolan's career. The reason was simple: Nolan was not making a small historical drama. He was taking one of the oldest and most famous adventure stories in human history and turning it into a massive Hollywood epic. The movie has a reported budget of around $250 million, a huge international cast, real-world filming locations, large action sequences, mythical creatures, and IMAX photography. It also runs for almost 3 hours, making it a major theatrical experience rather than a simple action movie. But after audiences finally watched it, one big question became important: was the Odyssey really as good as people expected? The answer from critics and audiences has been mostly positive, but not everyone agreed. Some people consider it one of Christopher Nolan's best films, while others believe the movie is too serious, too long, or too different from Homer's original story. So let's look at the complete reaction to The Odyssey, including its story, acting, direction, visuals, music, audience response, criticism, ratings, and box office success. The basic story: the story follows Odysseus, played by Matt Damon, the king of Ithaca. After fighting in the Trojan War, Odysseus wants to return home to his wife Penelope and his son Telemachus, but the journey home becomes far more difficult than he ever expected. Instead of reaching Ithaca quickly, Odysseus and his men face years of danger. They travel through a world filled with storms, enemies, mythical creatures, strange islands, gods, and supernatural forces. But the movie is not only about a man trying to survive a dangerous journey, it is also about what war does to people. Odysseus returns from war as a different person. He has seen death, destruction, betrayal, and violence. Even though he survives physically, the experience changes him emotionally. This is one of the biggest ideas that critics noticed in Nolan's version of the story. The Guardian praised the movie for treating the journey as a story about the emotional cost of war and the difficulty of returning home after a major conflict. The review described Nolan's version as a story about post-war pain, loss, and a man trying to reconnect with the life he left behind. This makes the movie deeper than a simple adventure story. Odysseus is not just fighting monsters, he is fighting his memories, he is fighting his guilt, he is fighting the consequences of his own choices, and most importantly, he is fighting to find his way back home. Christopher Nolan's direction. One of the strongest parts of the movie is Christopher Nolan's direction. Nolan has become famous for making large movies that also contain serious ideas. Films like Inception, Interstellar, Dunkirk, Oppenheimer, and The Dark Knight showed that he likes combining huge cinematic moments with complicated human stories. With The Odyssey, Nolan had an almost perfect story for his style. The original story already contains war, time, memory, fate, family, death, mythology, dreams, and a long journey. Nolan takes all of these ideas and builds them into a large cinematic world. Many critics praise the ambition of his direction. Rotten Tomatoes currently shows the film with a very strong 94% critics score from hundreds of reviews and a 97% audience score from more than 10,000 verified ratings. Its critics' consensus praises the movie for giving the ancient story a huge scale while keeping strong human emotion at its center. Metacritic also shows a strong response from professional critics, with a 88 Metascore based on dozens of critic reviews. Most of those reviews are positive, while a smaller number are mixed. This tells us something important. The movie is not simply being praised because Christopher Nolan made it. Many critics believe Nolan actually found a way to make an ancient story feel modern. The visual experience. The visuals are probably one of the biggest reasons people went to see The Odyssey in theaters. Nolan shot the movie using large format IMAX film, and the production was designed for the biggest possible screens. The result is a movie that wants to be experienced in a theater. The landscapes are enormous. The oceans look powerful. The battles feel large. The ships look impressive. The mythical locations feel mysterious. And the action scenes are designed to make the audience feel surrounded by the movie. This is especially important because The Odyssey is not a story that takes place in one location. Odysseus travels through many different places, and Nolan uses different environments to make each part of the journey feel different. The movie moves between battlefields, oceans, islands, caves, villages, palaces, and strange supernatural locations. The Guardian praised the film's huge IMAX landscapes and described the visual experience as one of its major strengths. Many audience members also said the movie should be watched on the biggest screen possible. Rotten Tomatoes audience coverage found viewers praising the acting, story, atmosphere, music, and IMAX photography. That is important for a movie like this. Some movies work perfectly well on a television. The Odyssey was clearly designed to be seen in a cinema. Matt Damon as Odysseus. Matt Damon plays the central character, Odysseus. This was one of the most important casting choices in the movie because almost the entire story depends on the audience believing in this character. Damon plays Odysseus as an experienced soldier and king, but also as a tired and damaged man. He is not shown as a perfect superhero. He makes mistakes, he carries guilt, he remembers the people he has lost, and he becomes increasingly desperate to return home. This version of Odysseus is more emotional and serious than some traditional versions of the character. The Guardian praised Damon's performance, describing his Odysseus as a man whose face has been changed by years of suffering and war. Other critics also praised Damon. Metacritic's collection of reviews includes critics who called his performance one of the major strengths of the movie. Some audiences, however, had a different reaction. A number of viewers felt that Damon sometimes looked more like Matt Damon than Odysseus. This is a common problem when a very famous actor plays a legendary character. Some people see the character, other people see the actor. That reaction appeared in audience discussions as well. One Guardian reader said the large number of famous actors sometimes made it difficult to forget the stars and completely see the characters. So while Damon received strong praise overall, his casting was not perfect for everyone. Anne Hathaway as Penelope. Anne Hathaway plays Penelope, Odysseus's wife. Her character represents one of the most emotional parts of the story. While Odysseus is away for years, Penelope is forced to wait for him. She does not know whether he will return. At the same time, powerful men around her want her to choose another husband. This creates a different kind of battle. Odysseus is fighting enemies at sea. Penelope is fighting pressure at home. Hathaway received praise for her performance, especially for bringing emotional strength to a character who spends much of the story waiting for Odysseus. However, this is also one area where the movie received criticism. Some classicists and viewers felt that Nolan did not give the female characters as much depth as the original story allows. The Guardian published a classicist's criticism arguing that Nolan's version makes Odysseus more emotionally sensitive but removes some of the complexity and importance of the woman in Homer's poem. Another Guardian reader praised Hathaway but questioned the idea of Penelope waiting for a man for 20 years and felt the movie could have given her more power and importance. So Hathaway's acting was generally liked, but the way Penelope's character was written created debate. Tom Holland as Telemachus. Tom Holland plays Telemachus, the son of Odysseus and Penelope. His character has his own journey. He grows up without his father and has to deal with the possibility that Odysseus may never return. Telemachus is not simply waiting for his father. He is trying to understand who his father really was. That makes his relationship with Odysseus more complicated. Many viewers liked Holland's performance. One audience reaction described Holland as excellent and praised the more emotional and complicated version of Telemachus. Rotten Tomatoes audience reviews also include viewers specifically praising Holland and Hathaway's performances. Holland's performance gives the movie a younger emotional perspective. Odysseus represents the old generation. Telemachus represents the son who has grown up without his father. Their relationship gives the story another emotional layer. Robert Pattinson as Antinous. Robert Pattinson plays Antinous, one of the major suitors who wants Penelope to marry him. Pattinson's character is very different from Odysseus. Antinous is not trying to return home. He is already at home and wants to take control of someone else's life. He becomes one of the main threats waiting for Odysseus when he finally returns. Pattinson received attention for the role because it allowed him to play a darker and more unpleasant character. His performance adds tension to the final part of the movie. The character also helps show what has happened to Ithaca while Odysseus has been away. The kingdom has become unstable. People are fighting for power, and Penelope is under pressure from men who believe Odysseus is never coming back. Zendaya, Lupita Nyong'o and Charlize Theron. The movie also features Zendaya, Lupita Nyong'o, and Charlize Theron. Zendaya plays Athena, who is connected to Odysseus and becomes an important supernatural presence. Lupita Nyong'o plays Helen and another major role connected to the story. Charlize Theron plays Calypso, another important figure Odysseus encounters during his journey. Because the cast is so large and filled with famous actors, almost every character arrives with a lot of audience attention. That is both a strength and a weakness. It makes the movie feel important, but it can also make some characters feel like they are there because a famous actor needed a role. Some audience members felt that certain performers were underused. One Guardian reader specifically felt that Charlize Theron was underused and questioned some of the casting choices. So while the cast is one of the movie's biggest attractions, it also created some criticism. The mythical creatures. Another major attraction is the mythology. The movie includes many famous elements from Odysseus's journey. There are dangerous creatures, mysterious islands, strange supernatural events, and powerful beings. One of the most famous is the Cyclops. The movie also includes the Sirens, Calypso, Circe, and other legendary figures. Nolan does not treat these creatures as simple cartoon monsters. He tries to make them feel frightening and physical. This approach connects with the work of old-school special effects artists, especially Ray Harryhausen. The creatures are part of the reason the movie feels like a classic epic adventure. At the same time, some critics felt that certain mythical sequences did not have enough emotional development. Some viewers wanted more time with the creatures and more explanation of their worlds. Others liked the fact that Nolan did not turn every monster into a long superhero-style action scene. The action in the Odyssey is another major strength. The Trojan War scenes are large and violent. The battles are not presented as simple entertainment. They show the cost of war. Odysseus wins battles through intelligence and strategy rather than only physical strength. This is important because Odysseus has always been known for his intelligence. He is not simply a warrior, he is a thinker. The famous Trojan horse sequence is one of the most important examples. Nolan turns the famous idea into a serious military operation. The Guardian praised the way the film presents the Trojan horse and connects Odysseus's victory with guilt and consequences. The movie also contains smaller fights and violent moments during Odysseus's journey. The final section becomes especially intense when Odysseus finally returns home. The sound and music sound is extremely important in a Christopher Nolan movie. In the Odyssey, the sound design creates tension throughout the journey. The ocean, the battles, the weapons, the creatures, the storms, the crowds, everything is designed to make the world feel large. Some critics loved this approach, but sound was also one of the areas that received criticism. Some audience members complained that the movie was extremely loud, especially in IMAX. One Guardian reader said the sound was so loud that they needed earplugs before they could comfortably hear the dialogue. Other viewers enjoyed the powerful sound because it made the movie feel more like a huge cinematic event. So this is one of those areas where audience opinion was divided. For some people, the sound makes the movie more exciting. For others, it becomes too much. The dialogue is another controversial part of the movie. Some critics praised Nolan's ability to make an ancient story understandable to modern audiences, but others felt that some lines sounded too modern. The characters sometimes speak in a direct and simple way rather than using poetic language. This makes the movie easier for general audiences to understand, but it also means that some of the original feeling of Homer's language is lost. One Guardian reader specifically criticized the use of modern phrases and American accents because they felt out of place in an ancient Greek setting. This criticism is important. Nolan had to make a choice. He could make the movie sound like an ancient poem, which might be difficult for modern audiences, or he could make the dialogue more modern and easy to understand. He chose the second option. For many viewers, this works. For others, it breaks the illusion. The biggest criticism, changes to Homer. Perhaps the biggest criticism of the Odyssey is that Nolan changes the original story. Anyone who knows Homer's poem will notice differences. Nolan does not simply copy the ancient text, he combines different parts of the mythology, changes some characters, changes some relationships, and gives certain events a different meaning. He almost makes Odysseus more emotionally modern. The original Odysseus is a complicated character. He can be clever, selfish, violent, charming, dishonest, brave, and manipulative. Nolan's version focuses more heavily on guilt, responsibility, trauma, and redemption. That gives the character a modern emotional journey. But some classicists believe this removes some of the strange and complicated qualities that made Homer's Odysseus interesting. The Financial Times reported criticism from classicists and literary figures who believe Nolan's version makes Odysseus too serious and removes some of the humor, complexity, and energy of the ancient character. This is a major debate surrounding the film. Is Nolan supposed to copy Homer, or is he allowed to create his own version? There is no simple answer. Movies have changed ancient stories many times, but because the Odyssey is such an important work of literature, people naturally have strong opinions about changes. The movie's emotional side. Despite all the action and mythology, the emotional story is one of the strongest parts. At its heart, the movie is about a man trying to return to his family. Odysseus has spent years away. Penelope has waited for years. Telemachus has grown up without his father. This creates a feeling of loss that continues throughout the movie. The movie asks a simple question: what happens to a person after years of war? Odysseus wins battles, but he does not return home as the same man who left. He carries the memories of everyone he lost. He also carries responsibility for things he did during the war. This gives the journey emotional weight. The Guardian praised this aspect of the movie, saying Nolan turns the ancient adventure into a story about the cost of war and the difficulty of emotionally returning home. Is the movie too long? The runtime is around 2 hours and 53 minutes. That is a long movie. For fans of Nolan, this may not be a problem, but some viewers felt that the movie had slow sections. The story contains many different events, and Nolan sometimes spends time moving between different characters and timelines. Some people love this structure, others wanted the movie to move faster. One IMDb user review criticized the film for feeling extremely long and complained about the dialogue, music, and some character choices. On the other hand, RogerEbert.com argued that the movie actually feels shorter than its nearly 3-hour runtime because of Nolan's editing and the way the story moves through time. So again, audience reaction is divided. If you enjoy slow, detailed epic movies, the runtime may feel perfect. If you prefer fast action, some parts may feel too long. What critics are saying? The professional critics have been mostly positive. Rotten Tomatoes currently lists the movie at 94% from critics and 97% from verified audience ratings. Metacritic gives the film an 88, placing it in the universal acclaim category. The majority of critic reviews are positive, with the smaller number calling it mixed. The Guardian gave the film 5 out of 5 stars and described it as a huge and ambitious interpretation of Homer's story. RogerEbert.com also gave the film a highly positive review, praising Nolan's structure and the way he handles themes of chance, fate, memory, and storytelling. Variety was more mixed. Its review praised the scale and excitement of the movie but described it as somewhat emotionally distant. This is an important criticism because it shows that even people impressed by the technical side of the film did not always feel the same emotional connection. The Hollywood Reporter also had reservations, especially about some uneven sections, dialogue, and casting, although it still praised the strength of the ensemble cast. So the overall critical opinion is clear. Most critics think the movie is impressive, but not every critic thinks it is perfect. What audiences are saying? Audience reaction has also been mostly positive. Rotten Tomatoes currently shows a 97% popcorn meter, which means the verified audience response is extremely strong. IMDb has also shown a strong rating, around the low to mid-8 range, with tens of thousands of ratings. Many audience members praise the movie for its scale. They love the performances, they love the action, they love the IMAX experience, they love the atmosphere, and many people believe this is the kind of movie that should be watched in theaters. However, not every audience member agrees. Some viewers think the movie is too serious. Some dislike the modern dialogue. Some believe the characters are not developed enough. Some think the movie is too long, and some people simply do not like Nolan's style. That is normal for a director as distinctive as Christopher Nolan. His movies often divide audiences. IMAX experience. If there is one thing that almost everyone seems to agree about, it is that the Odyssey is visually massive. The movie was made for large screens. The IMAX format makes the landscapes feel enormous. The battle scenes become more powerful. The ocean scenes become more impressive. The sound becomes more intense, and the mythical creatures feel larger. The film also achieved major IMAX success. Reports say it became IMAX's top domestic earner and passed previous records in the format. That is a major achievement. It shows that people were not simply watching the movie, they were paying extra to experience it in premium formats. Box office success. The biggest proof that audiences were interested is the box office. The movie opened extremely strongly. Its opening weekend in the United States and Canada was around $123.5 million, according to IMDb's box office information, while Rotten Tomatoes reported a worldwide opening of roughly $264 million. That made it one of the biggest openings of the year. The movie later crossed the $1 billion worldwide mark. Recent reports place its worldwide total at more than $1.1 billion. This made the Odyssey Christopher Nolan's highest-grossing movie ever without adjusting for inflation. That is a huge achievement. Remember, this is an R-rated epic based on an ancient Greek poem. It is not a superhero movie. It is not part of a giant superhero universe. It is not a remake of a modern blockbuster. It is an old literary story turned into a 3-hour historical fantasy movie, and audiences still took it beyond $1 billion. The China release. Another important part of the box office story is China. The movie had not yet completed its Chinese theatrical run at the time of recent reports. The Guardian reported that the film arrived in China with strong interest, but analysts were uncertain about exactly how much money it would make there. Estimates varied widely because the Chinese market has become more difficult for Hollywood movies and domestic Chinese films are very strong. The strong interest in China could push the movie's final worldwide total even higher. That means the final box office number is not completely finished yet. Is it Nolan's best movie? This is probably the biggest question for fans. Is the Odyssey better than Oppenheimer? Better than Interstellar? Better than The Dark Knight? Better than Inception? There is no single answer. Some critics have called it one of Nolan's greatest achievements. Others believe Oppenheimer remains more intelligent and emotionally complex. Metacritic's reviews show both sides. Some critics gave the movie extremely high praise, while others said it does not reach the intellectual level of Oppenheimer or the emotional power of some of Nolan's earlier films. This is why the movie is interesting. It is possible to believe that The Odyssey is an amazing cinematic achievement without believing it is Nolan's absolute best movie. Why some people love it. People who love The Odyssey usually praise several things. First is the scale. The movie feels huge. Second is the acting. Matt Damon, Anne Hathaway, Tom Holland, Robert Pattinson, and the rest of the cast give the movie a major Hollywood presence. Third is the filmmaking. The IMAX photography and practical production make the movie feel physical. Fourth is the story. Even though Homer wrote it thousands of years ago, the idea of someone trying to return home after war still works. Fifth is the emotional side. The movie is about family, guilt, survival, loyalty, and redemption. These themes are easy for modern audiences to understand. Why some people dislike it. People who dislike the movie usually mention different problems. The first is the dialogue. Some believe it sounds too modern. The second is the runtime. Nearly 3 hours can feel long. The third is the casting. Some viewers feel that there are too many famous actors. The fourth is the changes to Homer. Classicists and fans of the original poem may not like Nolan's choices. The fifth is the emotional distance. Some viewers feel that the movie is technically amazing but does not always connect emotionally. Variety's review was one example of this type of criticism, describing the film as impressive but somewhat distant. Final review. So, after looking at the critics, audience reactions, ratings, and box office, what can we say about The Odyssey? It is clearly a major success. It has earned more than $1 billion worldwide. It has received strong reviews from professional critics. It has a very high verified audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. It has a strong IMDb rating. It has become Christopher Nolan's biggest movie financially, and it has become a major IMAX success. But it is not a perfect movie. Its biggest weaknesses are the same things that make it different. Nolan has changed Homer's story. He has made Odysseus more modern and emotionally damaged. He has changed the tone. He has used modern dialogue. He has focused heavily on war, guilt, trauma, and redemption. For some people, these changes make the movie better. For others, they take away something important from Homer's original story. The movie also has a very serious tone. There are moments when audiences may simply want a fun adventure, but Nolan instead gives them a darker and more emotional experience. That will not work for everyone, but perhaps that is exactly why the movie is interesting. Nolan did not simply try to make another fantasy adventure. He tried to make The Odyssey his own. He took an ancient story about a man trying to get home and turned it into a story about what happens to a person after war. The monsters are important. The battles are important. The mythology is important. But underneath all of that is a simple human story. A man wants to go home. His wife is waiting. His son wants his father back. And the man himself has to decide whether he can live with everything he did before he can truly return. That is why the story still works thousands of years after Homer created it. Final verdict: if you enjoy Christopher Nolan movies, The Odyssey is definitely worth watching. If you love large-scale adventure movies, it is worth watching. If you enjoy Greek mythology, it is worth watching. If you love IMAX cinema, it is probably one of the biggest movies you can experience on a giant screen. But if you are expecting a perfect copy of Homer's original poem, you may be disappointed. And if you prefer short, simple action movies, The nearly 3-hour runtime may test your patience. For me, the biggest achievement of the Odyssey is not simply its box office number. It is the fact that a story written thousands of years ago has once again become a major worldwide cinematic event. Christopher Nolan has taken an ancient hero and placed him inside a modern blockbuster. The result is huge, serious, emotional, violent, mysterious, and visually spectacular. It has weaknesses, it has controversial choices, it has moments that some viewers will love and others will dislike. But it is impossible to say that The Odyssey is a small movie. It is one of the biggest cinematic events of 2026, and with more than $1.1 billion worldwide, strong critic scores, strong audience reactions, and record-setting IMAX performance, it has already proved that audiences were ready to take this ancient journey with Odysseus. In the end, The Odyssey is not just a story about a Greek king fighting monsters. It is a story about coming home after everything has changed. It is about the cost of war. It is about family. It is about guilt. It is about survival. And it is about whether a person can truly return home after becoming someone completely different. That is what gives Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey its power. The movie may not satisfy everyone. Some will call it a masterpiece. Some will call it too long. Some will love Nolan's changes. Others will strongly disagree with them. But almost everyone can agree on one thing. The Odyssey is a massive cinematic experience, and Christopher Nolan has turned one of the oldest stories in the world into one of the biggest movies of 2026. For ReelSignal Studio, this is the kind of movie that gives you a lot to talk about, from its huge production and famous cast to its reviews, audience reaction, mythology, box office success, and the major changes Nolan made to Homer's original story. Ray Bradbury's short stories, Harry Harrison's stainless steel rat series, Robert Linusburn's myth adventures, a whole lot of Asimov and Ellison, Piers Anthony's Xanthan incarnations of Immortality series, William Slater's House of Stairs, a Chinese manga of Journey to the West, and Bernard Evslit's The Adventures of Ulysses. I read each of these volumes multiple times and draw from them still when I'm trying to reverse engineer a familiar sensation I get from new creations. They're my first connection with the collective, this shelf of Priya and U treasuries, and, aside from the Xanth books, which have aged poorly, they're what I encouraged my children to read as they were finding their way from childhood to experience. I pushed The Adventures of Ulysses especially hard and, later, Richard Latimore's scholarly, ethical translations of Homer's 12,000-line poem, split into 24 books for ease of study and presented as a close friend and mentor once called one of the only two stories that comprise the Western canon. The other, the crucifixion. I am protective of the Odyssey in the Iliad. In other words, I look for echoes of this shelf in everything I experience. And it's usually Homer that I find. I wanted to equip my kids with the same provisions I had shored my runes against. I took 4 years of college Latin to read Virgil's The Aeneid, the Trojan side of the story, essentially, in its original form in order to understand the tragedy from the loser's perspective. I taught myself enough Homeric Greek to tentatively sound out a few highlights from Homer. To my shame, I'll lack either the intellectual or linguistic rigor to go deep in a language with a different alphabet that was never really intended to be spoken. By comparison, Latin's a breeze. For a while, I made these stories, Ovid, Hesiod, and Aeschylus, my personality, a stopgap for insecurity and self-loathing, a shield and armor against confronting who I was. Throughout my first screening of Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey, I found myself chewing the insides of my cheeks to prevent myself from overreacting to details glossed over or missed altogether. No, it's Elpenor to whom Odysseus speaks first in the underworld, then Anticolia, his mother, because for me to feel whole, this material once had to be more mine than anyone else's. It's mine the way a well-chewed binky is mine, a plush bear, a rubber pacifier. Of course, it's only mine in the sense that this story is all our stories. If Homer were alive today and given the task of writing the Odyssey, he would adapt it to contemporary sensibilities and social mores, because the intent, inasmuch as anyone can glean it from these poets, was to provide a gateway to the lessons embedded in our collective unconscious. The Coen brothers recognized this in their very fine Depression-era adaptation, Oh Brother, where art thou?" Several times throughout the Odyssey, Odysseus, Matt Damon, laments that the gods don't speak in terms we can understand. Maybe not, but Nolan does. This is the job of the artist. While I could quibble about the American accents, Homer wrote in a form of Greek that was purposefully elevated from spoken Greek. I appreciate the instinct to meet the audience where it is. The invocation to the muse in Paradise Lost, after all, is a mission statement, the poet seeking to explain the ways of God to man. This is why I love the casting of Damon as the cleverest of Greek heroes, since he is at his best playing Will Hunting, a smart yet unsophisticated guy discovering that intelligence is merely another sick joke of a genetic mutation, that wisdom brings no profit to the wise. Sometimes, you're so smart, you break the world. The mark of a good adaptation is not that it plays every note, but that it honors every beat. But a great adaptation takes the material and makes something new from it, and so it is that Nolan does what I believe Homer did with the songs and folktales of his region. The Odyssey is an urgent diagnosis of who we are as a species at this point in our social evolution. Crucially, Nolan, like Homer, uses the key art form of his time to tell his version. In the largest format currently available, he has made a $250 million horror movie about how the moral abomination of winning has destroyed our notions of morality, along with our essential decency. The law of Zeus is invoked throughout the Odyssey, a maxim that calls for welcoming strangers into your home with decorous hospitality and deference, lest you burn down the foundations on which a society is constructed. If you play by no rules, you're bestial, swine, good for nothing but the slaughter you've earned. If you are able to see the Odyssey in a theatre in a dark cavea, do so. We are a species made of stories, and these archetypes told in these holy spaces are not just emotionally and psychologically bracing, but biologically important for our continued survival. Am I making too much of this? If you think so, you'll have to find your own way out. Go with your gods. I'll go with mine. I assume you know the story of Odysseus. What I'll say is that Nolan leans heavily into the great trickster's shame. He has failed as a leader of his men. He has failed the modern world by loosing inhumanity upon it. His arrogance and boastfulness have doomed them, and his attenuation of a relatively short journey home into a 10-year journey is due more to self-sabotage and avoidance than to mere misadventure. He confesses all of this to his lover, Calypso, Charlize Theron, and then again to his wife, Penelope, Anne Hathaway. The entire segment of development and pre-production by late 2023, Christopher Nolan had not yet settled on what would follow his 2023 biographical drama Oppenheimer. Although he was open to several possible directions for his next project, he felt strongly that whatever he pursued would need to be something he could commit to fully. That calculus shifted in the spring of 2024, after Oppenheimer swept the major categories at the Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director. Buoyed by the film's critical and commercial triumph, Nolan and his wife and longtime producing partner, Emma Thomas, felt they finally had the latitude to explore an ambitious follow-up. Nolan began drafting a script shortly afterward, though Thomas indicated in interviews that spring that the practical logistics of the production had not yet been worked out. By October 2024, reports surfaced that Nolan was developing his new project at Universal Pictures, continuing the relationship he had built with the studio on Oppenheimer. He was confirmed to be writing and producing the film once again through Syncopy, the production company he runs with Thomas. Matt Damon, who had worked with Nolan on both Oppenheimer and Interstellar, 2014, was reported to be in talks for the lead role, with filming targeted to begin in early 2025. Notably, unlike Oppenheimer, which Universal had acquired through a competitive auction process, this new film was set up directly at the studio from the outset, and it was given a release date of July 17, 2026. For months, Universal and Nolan kept the project's premise deliberately vague, fueling widespread speculation among journalists and fans. Theories ranged from a vampire period piece to a modern reboot of the 1983 helicopter thriller Blue Thunder, to a long-rumored adaptation of the 1960s British spy series The Prisoner, a project Nolan had once been attached to back in 2009. All of these theories eventually proved unfounded. Nolan later remarked that the trade-off of staying silent about his projects was that it invited rampant guessing, though he said he found the process entertaining rather than frustrating. Damon's involvement was confirmed publicly in October 2024, around the same time Tom Holland's casting was announced. Soon after, two other Nolan veterans joined the ensemble: Anne Hathaway, who had appeared in The Dark Knight Rises, 2012, and Interstellar, and Robert Pattinson, who had starred in Tenet, 2020. They were joined in short order by Zendaya, Lupita Nyong'o, and Charlize Theron. Damon, Holland, Hathaway, and Pattinson were positioned as the film's leads, with Nyong'o and Zendaya cast in prominent supporting roles. Notably, Pattinson was reportedly the only actor among the principal cast who insisted on reading the screenplay before agreeing to join the project. In December 2024, Universal formally unveiled the project's identity: an adaptation of Homer's ancient Greek epic poem, the Odyssey, described by the studio as a mythic action epic that would be shot across multiple countries. The choice carried personal resonance for Nolan. 2 decades earlier, he had been briefly attached to direct Troy, 2004, the Wolfgang Petersen film based on the Iliad, the poem that precedes the Odyssey and the timeline of the Trojan War myth cycle. Petersen ultimately chose to make Troy himself instead of directing a planned Batman vs Superman film, a decision that indirectly opened the door for Nolan to make Batman Begins, 2005, instead. Nolan has said he felt he had been somewhat out of his depth when it came to tackling Troy at that stage of his career, but that 2 decades of directing large-scale productions left him better equipped to take on the Odyssey's sprawling narrative. Casting continued into early 2025, adding several more Nolan collaborators, including Benny Safdie, Elliot Page, Himesh Patel, Bill Irwin, and James Remar, alongside newcomers to his filmography such as John Bernthal, John Leguizamo, and Samantha Morton. Cosmo Jarvis was cast in a role but exited shortly before filming began due to a scheduling conflict, and was replaced by Logan Marshall Green. In mid-February 2025, Universal confirmed that Damon would portray Odysseus. Following earlier rumors that suggested Holland might take on the title role, Holland was ultimately confirmed as playing Odysseus's son, Telemachus. Nolan has described the Odyssey as the largest and most demanding production of his career purely because of its scale. He explained his attraction to the material by noting that, despite its foundational status in Western storytelling, the poem had never received a large-scale adaptation from a major Hollywood studio, something he considered a strange gap in cinema history. Nolan and Thomas both characterized the Odyssey as foundational to storytelling generally, pointing out that it contains elements of horror, mystery, romance, and thriller narratives all at once. To prepare, Nolan immersed himself in multiple English translations of the poem, including those by classicist Emily Wilson, by E.V. Rue, and by Robert Fagles. He was especially drawn to Wilson's rendering of Odysseus as a complex, calculating figure, and cited her interpretation of the character's cunning as a specific influence on his approach to the role. Visually and tonally, Nolan drew on the Greek mythology films he grew up watching, particularly the stop-motion creature work of special effects artist Ray Harryhausen. He wrote the script using a non-linear structure, a hallmark of much of his prior work. While Nolan and his collaborators described the adaptation as broadly faithful to Homer's text, he made several notable departures, giving greater prominence to Odysseus's dog, Argus, expanding the interactions between Odysseus and Telemachus, portraying the witch goddess Circe as unsettling yet ultimately sympathetic, and complicating the emotional reunion between Helen of Troy and her husband, the Spartan king Menelaus, rather than presenting it as a simple resolution. To reconcile the poem's fantastical elements with his interest in what he calls tactile realism, Nolan opted to depict the actions of the gods indirectly, through natural phenomena that would have seemed supernatural to people of the era, rather than depicting deities directly. He described this approach as a major creative breakthrough for the production. He cited Andrei Tarkovsky's and Ray Rublev, 1966, and Akira Kurosawa's Ran, 1985, as key visual and tonal touchstones, particularly for their atmosphere. Although he considered casting actors to physically portray the Olympian gods hurling thunderbolts, he ultimately decided that conveying the character's fear of divine consequences was more immersive than showing the gods outright. Production designer Ruth de Jong and costume designer Ellen Mirojnick, both of whom worked on Oppenheimer, returned for the Odyssey. Because the archaeological record for Bronze Age Greece is fragmentary, the production undertook extensive research to design plausible armor, weaponry, and ships. Nolan noted that the earliest surviving depictions of Homeric characters generally show them dressed in the manner of Homer's own era rather than the earlier Bronze Age setting of the events themselves, and argued this gave some justification for prioritizing how the poem's first audiences would have imagined the story. Mirojnick used materials such as blackened bronze, silver, and sulfur to visually signal Agamemnon's elevated status through his armor design. Cast members have since spoken publicly about the daunting scale of the undertaking. Damon has described his initial reaction to reading the script as a mix of excitement and intimidation, saying he ultimately resolved to focus on his own performance and trust Nolan to manage the production's countless moving parts rather than worry about elements outside his control. Holland, who plays Telemachus, called the production the best experience of his career and praised the working relationships between Nolan and Thomas, describing the chance to be mentored by them on a project of this scale as uniquely valuable. In joint interviews, Damon, Hathaway, and Holland also discussed the technical adjustment of performing in close proximity to the bulky IMAX cameras throughout the shoot, a departure from the smaller format cameras more commonly used on set. Supporting cast members, including Himesh Patel, Benny Safdie, Lupita Nyong'o, and John Leguizamo, later described Nolan's exacting approach to staging practical, in-camera sequences, with several noting that he consistently pushed for scenes to feel rawer and more physically grounded than they initially anticipated. Filming principal photography ran for 91 days, from February 25 to August 5, 2025. Wrapping 9 days ahead of the original schedule. Locations shooting spanned 6 countries, Morocco, Greece, Italy, Iceland, Scotland, and the United States, with additional work in Malta and Western Sahara. Cinematographer Hoyt van Hoytema, another frequent Nolan collaborator, returned to shoot the film, continuing a practice Nolan has followed since The Dark Knight, 2008. The Odyssey was shot entirely on IMAX film cameras, making it the first feature ever filmed exclusively with that format. Much of the shoot used the newly built, lighter, and quieter version of the IMAX camera developed specifically for the production, and the crew ultimately used more than 2 million feet, or roughly 610 kilometers, of IMAX 70mm film stock. Visual effects house Wattier Diaresis Workshop supported the production, which operated under the working title Charlie's Tale. Nolan said his choice to shoot on location, rather than relying heavily on sets or digital environments, was meant to capture the physical difficulty that ancient travelers would have faced navigating an unmapped, uncharted world, and he felt the unpredictable weather the crew encountered only reinforced that sense of hardship. Filming began in late February at the A8 de Macron Ben Hadou village near Ouarzaz 8, Morocco, standing in for the city of Troy during the war's final days, as well as in the cities of Essaouira and Marrakesh. Van Hoytema rigged an extensive array of portable LED lights to replicate the specific color temperature of firelight for a nighttime raid sequence, giving Nolan the freedom to shoot in any direction without being constrained by traditional lighting setups. From March 10 to 21, the production moved to the Messenia region of the Greek Peloponnese, filming in Pylos, at Methoni Castle, on the Omirilakos beach in Yavava, and at Nestor's Cave on Voidakilia beach for sequences involving the Cyclops Polyphemus, along with an archaeological palace site in Acrocorinth, near Corinth. The Greek leg of production, which lasted roughly 3 weeks, was handled in partnership with the NAF subsidiary of Fall Aero House Productions and received more than a negation $6.5 million, about $7.5 million, in funding from Greece's Hellenic Film and Audiovisual Center, part of a broader roughly a negation $140 million investment the agency has made across more than 200 domestic and international productions. along with the 40% cash rebate. By March 27, the crew had relocated to the Aegean Islands off Sicily to film on Favignana, an island believed by some scholars to correspond to the Goat Island described in the poem. From April 15 to May 15, water-based filming continued throughout the Aeolian Islands, including Lipari, Basilazzo, and Vulcano, standing in for the mythical island of Ilia, with local ordinances placing certain restrictions on the shoot. Italian production company Wildside, part of the Fremantle Group, serviced this leg of filming. For maritime sequences, the production employed the Drake and Herald H.A.Yanarfagr, the largest modern reconstruction of a Viking longship, repurposed here as an ancient Greek warship commanded on screen by Odysseus's crew. The vessel was sailed between filming locations rather than transported. Nolan described the experience of filming at sea as uniquely primal. By early May, roughly halfway through the shoot, the production moved to the Falls Lake water tank on the Universal Studios lot in Los Angeles, the only set built on a soundstage for the entire film. Filming then continued at Finelater Castle in Moray, Scotland, in early June. For 10 days in late June, the crew traveled to remote parts of Iceland in partnership with local production company True North, filming at the Landeyjahtilde FN Harbour, the HJ8tilde F8 I Mountain, the Markarflagjatilde River, and the SN8tilde Broken Bar Felsens Peninsula, primarily using the region's black sand beaches to represent the underworld of Hades. Production then returned to Scotland for scenes at Buckie Harbour along the Moray Firth and at Sunnyside Beach near Cullen, before filming in Culbean Forest from July 3 to 16 and returning again to Finelater Castle through July 25. Theron shot her scenes during the final 2 weeks of that month. Between July 17 and 22, Damon and Zendaya filmed at the White Dune near Dakhla, a city in western Sahara that has been under Moroccan administration since 1975. The decision to film there drew condemnation from the UN-recognized Polisario Front and from organizers of the Sahara International Film Festival, who characterized the choice as effectively whitewashing Morocco's occupation of the territory. Although festival organizers called for filming to be halted, the Dakhla shoot had already concluded by the time the statement was issued. A subsequent open letter urged Nolan to obtain consent from representatives of the Sahrawi people or remove the footage entirely. It was signed by a number of prominent figures, including Spanish actors Javier and Carlos Bardem, Luis Tosar, Carolina Yust, and Juan Diego Boto, filmmakers Rodrigo Saragoyan and Dekar Balan, and Sahrawi human rights advocate El Ghali Jimmy. In contrast, the Moroccan Cinematographic Center welcomed the production, describing it as an important showcase for the Moroccan film industry and noting it as the first major American production to film in that specific territory. Additional filming took place in Malta for sequences set at Calypso's Cave, before the production returned to the Universal lot for most of its final week of shooting. Some filming was also expected in Ireland and the United Kingdom. Visual effects were handled by DNIG, with supervisor Andrew Jackson and editor Jennifer Lame, both returning from earlier Nolan productions, continuing their collaborations with the director. Post-production, editing on the Odyssey was overseen by Jennifer Lame, who has cut several of Nolan's recent films, while Nick led the visual effects work under supervisor Andrew Jackson, building on the technical approach the studio has used on Nolan's past projects. Given the sheer volume of footage generated across the production's 91 shooting days and its 6-country itinerary, post-production involved synthesizing material captured on location, at sea, and on the film's single soundstage set at Universal Studios into a coherent non-linear narrative structure, consistent with how Nolan had originally written the screenplay. Music by April 2025, composer Ludwig G8 was already at work on the film's score, continuing a collaboration with Nolan that began on Tenet and continued through Oppenheimer. Nolan wanted to avoid the sweeping orchestral sound typically associated with sword and sandal epics, so G8 instead experimented with a range of bronze gongs, which were recorded and processed through synthesizers to create a distinctive palette. Nolan specifically suggested incorporating the sound of a lyre for a scene in which Odysseus draws his bow, and expressed particular interest in the aulos, an ancient double-reed wind instrument. Because original aulos reeds no longer survive, musicians Callum Armstrong and Rosa Fragorapti worked to build functional replicas of both the aulos and the lyre, drawing on surviving ancient source material and studying imagery preserved on old urns to inform the reconstructions. English electronic musician James Blake also contributed vocals to portions of the score. The soundtrack album is set for digital release through Universal's Backlot music label on July 17, 2026. Time to coincide with the film's theatrical debut. Record manufacturer Mutant is producing physical editions as well, including a double-disc CD version and a triple LP vinyl release. Released theatrical ahead of the film's release, Universal generated significant press attention with the surprise first-look image of Damon in costume as Odysseus, released before filming even began. The photo, which showed Damon in profile wearing a Corinthian-style helmet topped with a red plume, drew scrutiny from historians and online commentators who argued the armor design was not accurate either to the likely dress of the period in which the Odyssey is set or to descriptions found in the Iliad. Some critics felt the image revealed little about the film's tone, while others saw it as an homage to earlier mythological epics from Nolan's childhood, including The 300 Spartans, 1962. And Jason and the Argonauts, 1963, the latter especially notable for Harryhausen's stop-motion effects work. A 70-second teaser trailer debuted in July 2025, roughly a year ahead of the film's release, playing before screenings of Universal's Jurassic World Rebirth. The teaser leaked online shortly afterward, generating a wave of fan excitement. Critics who covered the teaser described it as effectively atmospheric while remaining intentionally vague about plot specifics, a pattern consistent with earlier Nolan marketing campaigns. Some noted the muted color grading, while others praised its editing for suggesting mood over exposition. A more substantial 6-minute prologue sequence, depicting Odysseus and his men using the Trojan horse at the close of the Trojan War, premiered in December 2025 ahead of IMAX 70mm screenings of One Battle After Another and Sinners, and later played before Avatar, Fire and Ash. Critics who saw the extended footage described it as tense and gritty, drawing comparisons to the claustrophobic ship sequences in Nolan's Dunkirk, 2017, while others likened its structure to a story nested within a story. A separate 2-minute trailer released online in late December accumulated more than 121 million views globally within 24 hours, spread across TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and X, making it one of the most viewed trailers of the year and surpassing early viewership for Universal's Wicked, For Good as well as the first Oppenheimer trailer over a comparable period. Universal also partnered with NBC Sports on a cross-promotional advertising campaign starring Damon that tied the film's marketing to coverage of the 2026 Winter Olympics, with additional spots airing during NFL playoff broadcasts and the Super Bowl LX pregame show. A new TV spot featuring Holland, Bernth, and rapper Travis Scott, who plays a bard in the film and previously contributed a song to Tenet's soundtrack, aired during the AFC Championship game in late January 2026. Nolan later unveiled additional footage at Universal's CinemaCon presentation in April 2026 and debuted another trailer during an appearance on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert the following month. Tie-in merchandise included a specialty IMAX camera-themed popcorn bucket available at theaters generally, as well as a Trojan horse-shaped popcorn container offered at AMC, Regal, and Cinemark locations. The film's supporting ensemble was rolled out across the marketing campaign, with Holland as Telemachus, Hathaway as Penelope, Pattinson as Antinous, Nyong'o in a dual role as Helen of Troy and Clytemnestra, Zendaya as the goddess Athena, and Theron as the nymph Calypso. Ahead of release, the film's costume and production design, its handling of accents and dialogue, and several of its casting choices became subjects of public debate regarding historical accuracy. The armor and ship designs shown in trailers drew criticism from Greek publications, historians, and online commentators, some of whom argued the choices were unrealistic for the period and risked misrepresenting ancient Greek history in ways that could undercut the story's immersion. The armor worn by Agamemnon was frequently compared to the bought suit from Nolan's own The Dark Knight trilogy. One commentator at the Greek Reporter acknowledged the designs echoed archaic Greek aesthetics even while diverging from specific historical details. Military historian Brett Devereaux noted that iron armor did not exist in Greece during the Late Bronze Age period generally associated with the Odyssey setting, and argued that the costuming was only vaguely evocative of ancient Greek dress rather than grounded in a specific historical basis. He also observed that Homeric characters have been depicted anachronistically since antiquity. The ships were similarly noted for resembling Viking longships more closely than the biremes or pentacondyrs historically associated with the Trojan War era. Not all historians were critical, however. Classical historian Tom Holland, unrelated to the actor of the same name, argued that because Odysseus is a mythological rather than historical figure, an impressionistic approach to the material was preferable to an attempt at strict historical accuracy that he considered inherently unachievable, and he favorably compared the film's designs to the armor featured in 300, 2006. The casting of Kenyan actress Lupita Nyong'o as Helen of Troy drew particular backlash from some conservative commentators, including Nate Walsh and Elon Musk, who characterized the choice as an example of altering a traditionally white character's race. Numerous other commentators pushed back against these criticisms as rooted in racism, drawing comparisons to similar controversies surrounding the casting of Disney's live-action The Little Mermaid, 2023, and the Netflix docudrama Queen Cleopatra, 2023. At the Greek Reporter, one columnist argued that the casting overlooked the specifically Hellenistic origins of the figures being portrayed. Writing for Salon, a columnist argued that Helen has functioned as a symbolic figure whose meaning has shifted across cultures throughout history, and suggested that backlash focused narrowly on questions of historical accuracy was somewhat selective, given that it centered on issues of representation and identity more than fidelity to the underlying mythology. Nolan defended the casting by pointing to the strength and poise Nyong'o brought to the role, while Nyong'o herself pushed back on the idea that Helen's significance rested solely on her beauty, emphasizing instead who the character was beyond her appearance. Writing for The Guardian, Greek film critic Chris Coatnew called Nolan's stated intentions honorable but argued they made the near-total absence of Greek or Greek diaspora actors in the cast more conspicuous, contending that Greek mythological stories seem to be treated as a kind of shared, culturally unclaimed inheritance in a way other traditions are not. The film's trailers also drew criticism over several British cast members, including Holland and Pattinson, speaking with American accents and using contemporary American English rather than the British inflections traditionally associated with Hollywood historical epics. Commentators compared the choice to the mixed use of American and British accents in earlier historical films such as The Ten Commandments, 1956, Ben-Hur, 1959, Spartacus, 1960, and Gladiator, 2000, as well as television series like Rome, 2005, 2007, and Game of Thrones, 2011, 2019, arguing that a fully accurate approach using ancient Greek dialects would have alienated modern audiences regardless of which modern accent was ultimately chosen. Some critics argued that the modern British accent, despite existing in something like its present form for only roughly 250 years, has become conventionally associated with timelessness in period filmmaking, making the shift toward American accents feel like a more noticeable departure. Others welcomed the change as no less artificial a choice than the British accent convention it replaced. Nolan confirmed that he specifically directed the cast to use American accents rather than British or Greek accented English, and he compared the underlying challenge of balancing plausibility and accessibility to similar creative choices he made on Interstellar. The Odyssey held its world premiere in London on July 6, 2026, ahead of its wide theatrical release across the United States and the United Kingdom on July 17. The film was made available across an unusually broad range of formats, including IMAX's 1.90:1 aspect ratio, 70mm IMAX, standard 70mm and 35mm film prints, Dolby Vision, and premium large format presentations such as D-Box and RX. In an unusual move for a major studio release, tickets for select opening weekend IMAX 70mm screenings went on sale a full year in advance, on July 17, 2025. Several of these early showings sold out within 12 hours, including half of the 22 participating IMAX 70mm theaters in the United States, generating roughly $1.5 million in advance sales. IMDb named the film the most anticipated release of 2026, and trade outlets including Variety and The Wrap speculated it could become the year's highest-grossing film or surpass The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises to become Nolan's highest-grossing release outright, given the film's roughly $250 million budget and restrictive R rating. Some analysts noted it would need unusually broad audience appeal to succeed financially, positioning it among the most expensive R-rated films ever produced, ahead of Joker, Foliate and Deadpool Wolverine, both 2024. General ticket sales for the remaining IMAX 70mm, and premium large format screenings opened on June 4, 2026, ahead of standard ticketing later that month. Major platforms including Fandango and AMC Theaters reported significant delays, with wait times reaching up to an hour due to overwhelming demand, a level of traffic some compared to the ticketing rush surrounding the 2023 concert film Taylor Swift, The Eras Tour. The film generated $3.4 million from roughly 150,000 pre-sale tickets in its first 24 hours of general availability, the highest such total in 4 years at that point. At London's BF IMAX specifically, the film sold 28,000 pre-sale tickets within 24 hours, grossing roughly £750,000, about $1 million, more than double the venue's previous single-day pre-sale record, held by Dune, Part 2, 2024, and well ahead of the comparable early numbers recorded for Oppenheimer. By late June, trade analysts projected an opening weekend in the range of $80 million to $100 million domestically, citing both the strength of premium format pre-sales, skewed heavily toward Nolan's core cinephile audience, and the film's exclusive access to IMAX screens during its first 3 weeks in release. Tracking data at the time placed the film slightly ahead of Oppenheimer as the top choice among male audiences over the age of 25, while broader audience interest metrics placed it roughly on par with Project Hail Mary, another 2026 release that had opened to $80.5 million earlier in the year. The Odyssey was also nominated as the most anticipated film of the second half of 2026 at the 9th Astrom Mid-Season Movie Awards. Editing on The Odyssey was overseen by Jennifer Lame, who has cut several of Nolan's recent films, while Nick led the visual effects work under supervisor Andrew Jackson, building on the technical approach the studio has used on Nolan's past projects. Given the sheer volume of footage generated across the production's 91 shooting days and its 6-country itinerary, post-production involved synthesizing material captured on location, at sea, and on the film's single soundstage set at Universal Studios into a coherent non-linear narrative structure, consistent with how Nolan had originally written the screenplay. Music by April 2025, composer Ludwig G. Pilgro-Ranson was already at work on the film's score, continuing a collaboration with Nolan that began on Tenet and continued through Oppenheimer. Nolan wanted to avoid the sweeping orchestral sound typically associated with sword and sandal epics, so G. Pilgro-Ranson instead experimented with a range of bronze gongs, which were recorded and processed through synthesizers to create a distinctive palette. Nolan specifically suggested incorporating the sound of a lyre for a scene in which Odysseus draws his bow, and expressed particular interest in the aulos, an ancient double-reed wind instrument. Because original aulos reeds no longer survive, musicians Callum Armstrong and Rosa Fragorapti worked to build functional replicas of both the aulos and the lyre. drawing on surviving ancient source material and studying imagery preserved on old urns to inform the reconstructions. English electronic musician James Blake also contributed vocals to portions of the score. The soundtrack album is set for digital release through Universal's Backlot music label on July 17, 2026. Time to coincide with the film's theatrical debut. Record manufacturer Mutant is producing physical editions as well, including a double-disc CD version and a triple LP vinyl release. Released theatrical ahead of the film's release, Universal generated significant press attention with the surprise first-look image of Damon in costume as Odysseus, released before filming even began. The photo, which showed Damon in profile wearing a Corinthian-style helmet topped with a red plume, drew scrutiny from historians and online commentators who argued the armor design was not accurate either to the likely dress of the period in which the Odyssey is set or to descriptions found in the Iliad. Some critics felt the image revealed little about the film's tone, while others saw it as an homage to earlier mythological epics from Nolan's childhood, including The 300 Spartans, 1962. And Jason and the Argonauts, 1963, the latter especially notable for Harryhausen's stop-motion effects work. A 70-second teaser trailer debuted in July 2025, roughly a year ahead of the film's release, playing before screenings of Universal's Jurassic World Rebirth. The teaser leaked online shortly afterward, generating a wave of fan excitement. Critics who covered the teaser described it as effectively atmospheric while remaining intentionally vague about plot specifics, a pattern consistent with earlier Nolan marketing campaigns. Some noted the muted color grading, while others praised its editing for suggesting mood over exposition. A more substantial 6-minute prologue sequence, depicting Odysseus and his men using the Trojan horse at the close of the Trojan War, premiered in December 2025 ahead of IMAX 70mm screenings of One Battle After Another and Sinners, and later played before Avatar, Fire and Ash. Critics who saw the extended footage described it as tense and gritty, drawing comparisons to the claustrophobic ship sequences in Nolan's Dunkirk, 2017, while others likened its structure to a story nested within a story. A separate 2-minute trailer released online in late December accumulated more than 121 million views globally within 24 hours, spread across TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and X, making it one of the most viewed trailers of the year and surpassing early viewership for Universal's Wicked, For Good as well as the first Oppenheimer trailer over a comparable period. Universal also partnered with NBC Sports on a cross-promotional advertising campaign starring Damon that tied the film's marketing to coverage of the 2026 Winter Olympics, with additional spots airing during NFL playoff broadcasts and the Super Bowl LX pregame show. A new TV spot featuring Holland, Bernth, and rapper Travis Scott, who plays a bard in the film and previously contributed a song to Tenet's soundtrack, aired during the AFC Championship game in late January 2026. Nolan later unveiled additional footage at Universal's CinemaCon presentation in April 2026 and debuted another trailer during an appearance on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert the following month. Tie-in merchandise included a specialty IMAX camera-themed popcorn bucket available at theaters generally, as well as a Trojan horse-shaped popcorn container offered at AMC, Regal, and Cinemark locations. The film's supporting ensemble was rolled out across the marketing campaign, with Holland as Telemachus, Hathaway as Penelope, Pattinson as Antinous, Nyong'o in a dual role as Helen of Troy and Clytemnestra, Zendaya as the goddess Athena, and Theron as the nymph Calypso. Ahead of release, the film's costume and production design, its handling of accents and dialogue, and several of its casting choices became subjects of public debate regarding historical accuracy. The armor and ship designs shown in trailers drew criticism from Greek publications, historians, and online commentators, some of whom argued the choices were unrealistic for the period and risked misrepresenting ancient Greek history in ways that could undercut the story's immersion. The armor worn by Agamemnon was frequently compared to the bought suit from Nolan's own The Dark Knight trilogy. One commentator at the Greek Reporter acknowledged the designs echoed archaic Greek aesthetics even while diverging from specific historical details. Military historian Brett Devereaux noted that iron armor did not exist in Greece during the Late Bronze Age period generally associated with the Odyssey setting, and argued that the costuming was only vaguely evocative of ancient Greek dress rather than grounded in a specific historical basis. He also observed that Homeric characters have been depicted anachronistically since antiquity. The ships were similarly noted for resembling Viking longships more closely than the biremes or pentacondyrs historically associated with the Trojan War era. Not all historians were critical, however. Classical historian Tom Holland, unrelated to the actor of the same name, argued that because Odysseus is a mythological rather than historical figure, an impressionistic approach to the material was preferable to an attempt at strict historical accuracy that he considered inherently unachievable, and he favorably compared the film's designs to the armor featured in 300, 2006. The casting of Kenyan actress Lupita Nyong'o as Helen of Troy drew particular backlash from some conservative commentators, including Nate Walsh and Elon Musk, who characterized the choice as an example of altering a traditionally white character's race. Numerous other commentators pushed back against these criticisms as rooted in racism, drawing comparisons to similar controversies surrounding the casting of Disney's live-action The Little Mermaid, 2023, and the Netflix docudrama Queen Cleopatra, 2023. At the Greek Reporter, one columnist argued that the casting overlooked the specifically Hellenistic origins of the figures being portrayed. Writing for Salon, a columnist argued that Helen has functioned as a symbolic figure whose meaning has shifted across cultures throughout history, and suggested that backlash focused narrowly on questions of historical accuracy was somewhat selective, given that it centered on issues of representation and identity more than fidelity to the underlying mythology. Nolan defended the casting by pointing to the strength and poise Nyong'o brought to the role, while Nyong'o herself pushed back on the idea that Helen's significance rested solely on her beauty, emphasizing instead who the character was beyond her appearance. Writing for The Guardian, Greek film critic Chris Coatnew called Nolan's stated intentions honorable but argued they made the near-total absence of Greek or Greek diaspora actors in the cast more conspicuous, contending that Greek mythological stories seem to be treated as a kind of shared, culturally unclaimed inheritance in a way other traditions are not. The film's trailers also drew criticism over several British cast members, including Holland and Pattinson, speaking with American accents and using contemporary American English rather than the British inflections traditionally associated with Hollywood historical epics. Commentators compared the choice to the mixed use of American and British accents in earlier historical films such as The Ten Commandments, 1956, Ben-Hur, 1959, Spartacus, 1960, and Gladiator, 2000, as well as television series like Rome, 2005, 2007, and Game of Thrones, 2011, 2019, arguing that a fully accurate approach using ancient Greek dialects would have alienated modern audiences regardless of which modern accent was ultimately chosen. Some critics argued that the modern British accent, despite existing in something like its present form for only roughly 250 years, has become conventionally associated with timelessness in period filmmaking, making the shift toward American accents feel like a more noticeable departure. Others welcomed the change as no less artificial a choice than the British accent convention it replaced. Nolan confirmed that he specifically directed the cast to use American accents rather than British or Greek accented English, and he compared the underlying challenge of balancing plausibility and accessibility to similar creative choices he made on Interstellar. The Odyssey held its world premiere in London on July 6, 2026, ahead of its wide theatrical release across the United States and the United Kingdom on July 17. The film was made available across an unusually broad range of formats, including IMAX's 1.90:1 aspect ratio, 70mm IMAX, standard 70mm and 35mm film prints, Dolby Vision, and premium large format presentations such as D-Box and RX. In an unusual move for a major studio release, Tickets for select opening weekend IMAX 70mm screenings went on sale a full year in advance, on July 17, 2025. Several of these early showings sold out within 12 hours, including half of the 22 participating IMAX 70mm theaters in the United States, generating roughly $1.5 million in advance sales. IMDb named the film the most anticipated release of 2026. And trade outlets including Variety and The Wrap speculated it could become the year's highest-grossing film or surpass The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises to become Nolan's highest-grossing release outright, given the film's roughly $250 million budget and restrictive R rating. Some analysts noted it would need unusually broad audience appeal to succeed financially, positioning it among the most expensive R-rated films ever produced, ahead of Joker, Foliate and Deadpool Wolverine, both 2024. General ticket sales for the remaining IMAX 70mm, and premium large format screenings opened on June 4, 2026, ahead of standard ticketing later that month. Major platforms including Fandango and AMC Theaters reported significant delays, with wait times reaching up to an hour due to overwhelming demand. A level of traffic some compared to the ticketing rush surrounding the 2023 concert film Taylor Swift, The Eras Tour. The film generated $3.4 million from roughly 150,000 pre-sale tickets in its first 24 hours of general availability, the highest such total in 4 years at that point. At London's BF IMAX specifically, the film sold 28,000 pre-sale tickets within 24 hours, grossing roughly £750,000, about $1 million, more than double the venue's previous single-day pre-sale record, held by Dune, Part 2, 2024, and well ahead of the comparable early numbers recorded for Oppenheimer. By late June, trade analysts projected an opening weekend in the range of $80 million to $100 million domestically, citing both the strength of premium format pre-sales, skewed heavily toward Nolan's core cinephile audience, and the film's exclusive access to IMAX screens during its first 3 weeks in release. Tracking data at the time placed the film slightly ahead of Oppenheimer as the top choice among male audiences over the age of 25, while broader audience interest metrics placed it roughly on par with Project Hail Mary, another 2026 release that had opened to $80.5 million earlier in the year. The Odyssey was also nominated as the most anticipated film of the second half of 2026 at the 9th Astrom Mid-Season Movie Awards.